So Kathy, being an international coming to Denmark, can you explain a bit about your story and how it was for you coming here?
Yes, of course. First of all, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. And my story with Denmark started about almost 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. So we decided to live in Odense, and I came from Poland to Denmark. I came from being very active professionally, and I had a very active social life, to arriving in Denmark and finding it fantastic. And we lived in Odense, so it's Jose Anderson's hometown, the fairyland. And I started studying at the university and learning Danish. And it was a wonderful break for me because I went from working 60 hours a week to basically focusing on myself. So the beginning was very good. But after I finished my studies, I started looking for work, and that's where I would say some of the uphill battle started for me. I did not think it was going to be as difficult as it was. And I think a lot of it had to do with my expectations. So I thought things would be very different, and when they started to be the opposite, that was difficult for me to accept. And looking for work in Denmark is also something that I think varies, and depending on what culture you come from and what country you come from, the job search and also the way you write your CVs is different. So I do think having such workshops and information how to do that is important, but it was also a lot more than that. I struggled with the awareness of the cultural adjustment phases that were going on within myself. I was not aware of what was happening, and that was probably almost got me to a breaking point, because I became very, very sad. Now I know that it was a loss of identity that I was dealing with, as well as the cultural adjustment phases. And so not having that awareness was a big problem. So I would say, because I would kind of, as we're speaking, also give some tips. I think it's very important as internationals coming to Denmark to find professionals that can help out with that. So professionals that deal with cultural adjustment. I think that's crucial. For some people, it might be even finding a coach before you move. I think that's also a good idea, whatever works for you. But to get the awareness is key. So that was definitely something I did not have. One was managing my expectation. The other one was being aware of what is happening to me with the cultural adjustment. And eventually I did find work. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the with the stereotype that we have that work defines us. I know now that it doesn't, but back then for me that was a huge success, and I felt that this was what I was looking for, that having a job would mean that I have made it and now everything will be great. Of course, life is as it is, and it throws different things at us, and having my job and working full-time was wonderful, and then I became pregnant and I decided to stay home with my daughter, so I actually left my job and went on maternity leave, and then decided to be a stay-at-home mom. I think that what is really important to say is that a lot of us as internationals find ourselves in this position where we feel lost and we feel alone, because I felt very alone at that time when I was kind of in the lowest low point of my transition and adaptation. I felt that no one understood me and that no one was going through this. But over the years, and being involved in international communities and also working with internationals, I now always emphasize the fact that you're not alone, that this is completely normal, that we all go through this. And it's not just internationals who move to Denmark, it's internationals who move all over the world to different countries and different cities. It's just part of what happens to us when we move from our homeland to a new host country, or from a different host country to another one. The transition is always different because no country is the same. And we also go through changes, so we're not the same person that we were 10 years ago or 5 years ago. So it's very important to understand that and not to feel that it's something strange. It's completely normal, but having the tools to deal with it and having the awareness is very, very important.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think was something that I learned along the way was that communicating what is happening to you is very, very important. I, for some time, didn't feel comfortable with talking about how upset I was, and I think I can just say straight out how depressed I was. I didn't want to let my husband know. I didn't want to let people closest to me know, because I felt proud and I felt that I can handle it, but there is no shame in saying that we're having a hard time with something. And when we do, that's actually when we're already starting to help ourselves, and we can be on the way to feel better. So again, I can't stress enough to really be aware of what can happen. It doesn't happen to everyone. Some people have very smooth journeys and they transition very easily, and others have more of a challenging time. But to really put it out there and to say that it's normal, it's fine, and that there are people who can help, and there are support groups and even communities, international communities, just going out and talking to people. Because when we transition and we're feeling a little bit out of our comfort zone, sometimes we tend to stay at home, or we tend to lock ourselves in, and that doesn't help.
No.
So going out is very important. And maybe even thinking of that before you move. So making an action plan, or
That sounds a great piece of advice.
A lot.
Yeah, and just I want to stick to this gaining social life.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
I think in the beginning it was quite easy because I was studying Danish, so I was going to school, and that's where I found a lot of people who I could connect with. So that was quite easy. We then started moving around because we also lived in Kolding, and now we live in Copenhagen. So finding a social network for me has become quite natural, because I tend to I would write to people who were on international communities, for example. I would just write. I even did something like before we moved here to Copenhagen, I wrote to, I think it was on Expats in Copenhagen, I wrote, hey, we're moving to Copenhagen, I'm interested in this, this, and this. So I listed some of my hobbies, and I said that I have a child, and if there's any moms that are interested, for example, in play dates, or anyone who's interested also in writing, or I would appreciate it if they could write me, drop me a message, and then we could meet up for a coffee. It is stepping out of your comfort zone a lot of the time. So you have to be willing to put yourself out there, and sometimes people won't answer you, which is okay. But more often than not, a lot of people will answer you, because they're also looking for other people to connect. I think, again, we need to realize that there are other people just like us who are looking for others, who are looking to make friends, who are looking to make connections. And it's important to know that most of the time people won't come knocking on our door. No. That's something that I definitely learned. That we may think, okay, well, someone will maybe notice me, or they'll write me. If you don't take the first step, you might be at home sitting and waiting for a long time. So it's very, very uncomfortable at times, but then again, it's something wonderful and beautiful, because you learn that by being a little bit bold and courageous, you can really make a wonderful life for yourself. You can meet great people. You have to be willing to step out.
Yeah. And what about, one thing I guess is the international environment and the expats environment.
Yes.
Another thing is the native Danes.
Yeah.
How do you approach it? Is that the same approach you took, or?
For me, with Danes, it hasn't been that easy, because our life is very much centered around internationals. For me professionally, and also with my family life, because my husband, although he's Danish, he also comes from a mixed background, so we are a very multicultural family. But I have noticed, again, it's the same thing, that if you wait for people, then you might be waiting for a long time.
Yeah.
So I started seeing that if I was more open, if I smiled at someone or even made small talk, which I know is not exactly the the way to do it here, but I started having wonderful reactions, that people were not looking at me in a strange way, but that they would actually be willing to answer or smile. So it can even be such a little thing, because I think for a lot of people, they feel that, it's not really common to speak to strangers here or to say things. But I have seen that it's not that uncommon, that people are willing to answer you. They might not do it first, but they will reciprocate. So it is the way we are and the energy that we give off. And we can also be surprised. So being open, I think, is key, and trying.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. I think you have to be willing to try and put yourself out there over and over again, and it can get tiring. And it can, but I think that's something that we learn as internationals, that we learn to be more flexible, and we also see the benefits of that. We have right now wonderful neighbors. They're all Danish, all our neighbors, and they're fantastic. They welcomed us with open arms. They have said if there's anything, we have this kind of neighborhood watch that we all look out for each other's homes, and the kids play together. So it was so easy in that sense. But again, it was, we went into it being open and not feeling, ooh, we're coming in as new and they probably won't. That's the thing. Don't assume.
Yeah.
Because that's not the way to go. Assuming can always bring us down a bit, I think. We have to be open and see, and be willing to just try it out and see what happens.
Yeah, and we spoke about a little bit about this before, where you mentioned that you're working towards having the international understanding that it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street, but also the native Danes understand the same thing, that you have to be open in the two-way street. So it's not the international doing all the effort, but it's everyone doing an effort to have that cultural integration process to succeed with it.
Exactly.
You just said it so great. Can you explain a bit more about it?
I feel that, for me personally, when I first arrived, I was told over and over again that I need to integrate, that I need to learn the Danish way and become fully integrated. And I think that's I understand it. I understand where that comes from, but I also feel that it's important for all of us to work together. So it's a two-way street, as we were saying, that in any relationship, and I think it is a relationship with internationals coming into Denmark and Danes living with internationals, it becomes a sort of relationship. So for the relationship to work, it has to be a two-way street, because as in a romantic relationship or a friendship, it goes both ways, right? We give and take, and we're open to each other's differences, and we're open to each other's sometimes opposite opinions, but we also, of course, look for what we have in common, which is completely natural. So I think raising the awareness for everybody, what can we gain from living together, is quite important, because there's a lot to be gained. And I think emphasizing that is something that I'm definitely very passionate about. And I know that you are as well. I don't know if that answers it.
It did.
Yeah,
it did. It was very nice to have you here and talk to you about this important subject.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Aww.
So cute.